Defeating Soros-funded prosecutors at the ballot box, the game plan across the country, and what it could mean for Minnesota's largest city next. Tim Griffin, the Arkansas Attorney General and chairman of Protecting Americans Action Fund, is my guest. Tim, good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for giving this important topic some time.
I know you're taking some time and you're in the back seat of a car doing this interview, which we do appreciate. But before we discuss the Protecting Americans Project, I want to jump right in here. The Department of Justice announced just recently an investigation into a race-based policy that directs prosecutors to consider race when making plea deals. The policy was enacted by none other than our own Soros-backed Hennepin County attorney, Mary Moriarty. So the DOJ investigation may be a welcome sign of change, it seems, here, especially for her critics, who have been very vocal about many questionable moves made by her office at this point. The handling of the prosecution of State Trooper Ryan Londrigan, to her decision to grant diversion to a Minnesota state employee charged with causing more than $20,000 of damage to privately owned Tesla vehicles. Where does Moriarty rank on your list here, Tim?
Well, she is precisely the type of prosecutor that we're trying to keep out of office in the first place. So these prosecutors get elected, they start pursuing these sorts of policies, and if no one shines a light on it, if no one points out the unconstitutional nature of it, or just the fact that it doesn't work, right? If we don't do that, then most likely those prosecutors are going to stay in office. Now, sometimes even when we do point it out, they stay in office, depending on where we're talking about. But it's very important, and I emphasize this with Moriarty and the others that we follow around the country. It's very important that we connect what a prosecutor does or doesn't do with quality of life and outcomes that average Americans, everyday Americans, see in their lives. If you just talk about it as an academic matter and don't explain to people why it matters to them, right? Why it matters to safety in the local park, why it matters when you let your child walk in the neighborhood or not? Those sorts, is it safe to go outside? All of those sorts of things, we have to make the case that progressive prosecutors, their actions make us less safe. As I always say here in Arkansas, if you're not safe, you're not free. If you are avoiding parts of a town to fill up with gas, to shop, to spend time, to eat, if you're avoiding that part of town because of safety issues, as is often the case in urban areas where we have these progressive prosecutors, then you're not free. If you can't go where you want because of crime, you're not free. And Moriarty is just another example of this sort of prosecutor that we need to shine a light on.
And let's talk more about that, the goal of the Protecting Americans Project. It seems like some of these prosecutors, they've been flying under the radar, as you mentioned. What are some of the things that the Protecting Americans Project is doing about them?
Sure. Well, number one, it's about awareness. And I will tell you that a lot of these prosecutors are not household names. And so if you don't have an organization like ours drawing attention to them, people may never know what's going on.
That leads me to this next question about Chicago. I know Protecting Americans Project has done quite a bit of research on what's gone on there in Cook County, Illinois, specifically with the prosecutor Kim Foxx. She has turned Chicago and Cook County into a war zone. At least one comparison seems to suggest the number of shootings during her 8 years as a prosecutor total more than half the number of troops wounded in Afghanistan during the 13 years of that war. Is that accurate?
Yes, and here's you've nailed it here. What that prosecutor does in Chicago or doesn't do directly relates to the quality of life of the people who live there. And you're talking about Kim Foxx in Chicago and in the broader Cook County, not just Chicago proper. But here's the thing. The enemy is complacency. The enemy is when people say, well, it really doesn't matter who the prosecutor is. It'll be the same either way. That couldn't be more false. That is demonstratively false. Because what you see in areas where there's been a progressive prosecutor, what you see is when you replace that progressive prosecutor with someone that simply believes that violent people should be behind bars and that we should not have a culture of leniency, we should have a culture of compliance. That changes everything. What it really is all about is you either endorse and create a culture where people respect and comply with the law, or you create a culture where people don't give a rip. One or the other. And these progressive prosecutors, time after time, choose this culture where they let people off, where people aren't afraid of going to prison. They're not afraid of getting caught. They know they can probably just get off with a slap on the wrist. And what does that do? It encourages more of the same behavior. So that's the story we have to tell. And I think that we do that effectively through Protecting Americans Action Fund. And that's the whole reason we exist, to tell this story.
And I think lastly, just to sum that up a bit more, to drill down on this point, you were called a conspiracy theorist, I think, just a few years ago, if you brought this up, but the role of Alex Soros and George Soros. We have many Minnesota politicians who've been pictured with them, including our Attorney General, Keith Ellison, who's received the maximum donations from him, George Soros, and also our radio station, one of our local radio stations, WCCO Radio, now being owned by a Soros-backed media company. But that's sort of part of this story as well. I think that also needs to get out there. That's part of the plan here, right? Create chaos and also side with the criminal and not the victim to sort of normalize that type of behavior.
Yeah, and the good news is it's no longer something that people have to guess about or it's hidden or whatever. It's open, right? It's on filings. The Soros family have leaned in, and they are very open. And a lot of these candidates are very open. So it's not hard to figure out who's with whom on this. What the Soros family has counted on, and it's worked, is that you can make changes much more cheaply in these down ballot races for prosecutor.
Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty, her term is up in January of 2027. No word yet at this point if she is running for re-election. But what can people do?
The key is to stay engaged. The key is do not wait on an election cycle. Stay engaged. And if you're unhappy about the crime, there's probably something that your elected officials could be doing differently. And if you've got a progressive prosecutor, I can almost guarantee you they could be doing things differently. So you've got to be outspoken. You've got to follow the policies and all the different things that prosecutor's doing. I would also say follow Protecting Americans Action Fund. Keep up with what we're putting out, because if you have a progressive prosecutor where you live, we're probably going to be informing you and your community about the sort of thing that's going on.
For more information about the Protecting Americans Fund, check out enforcethelaw.us. Again, that's enforcethelaw.us. Arkansas Attorney General Tim Griffin, thanks again. We'll let you get your seatbelt on and get headed out of here. But thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Liz. If I get up in your part of the world, I'll come by and see y'all.
That will do it for this episode of Liz Collin Reports. We'll see you next time.